Alright, so Jill Vertes is definitely one of the most interesting stage moms I've covered in this series so far. The reason why I find Jill so interesting is because I feel like she's not like a lot of these stage moms that pretty much just threw their kids to the wolves, or dance moms that threw their kids to the wolves. She was someone who really cared for her daughter and went through really weird and malignant ways to get her daughter ahead, but it wasn't so evil like how some of these other mothers have done. Jill cared most for Kendall's well-being and only Kendall's well-being. She was there for Kendall, she made it very known, and she adored her daughter. It was very clear that she adored Kendall and wanted what was best for her. And I think what's nice about Jill is that she clearly wasn't seeking fame for herself. Her passion really came from the fact that she felt like her daughter was overlooked. It wasn't about seeking fame for herself, being so self-involved or self-absorbed. It was really about Kendall. In this video, we're going to be talking about Jill Vertes, how she was on the show Dance Moms, her personality, her motivations. We'll also talk about some things that even the cast has said about her, like Maddie saying on the show back in the day that she feels that Jill wanted it more than Kendall. And we're really just going to get into Jill and Kendall's dynamic that was shown on the show and any little things from outside of the show or since the show has ended. I'm not going to go as in depth with like everything that happened with Jill. I'm really focusing on her as a stage parent as well as her dynamics with Kendall. So that's the motivation behind this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. So from the moment Jill and Kendall entered Dance Moms, Jill made it very clear that her loyalty was to Kendall. It was not to Abby, it wasn't to anyone else in the studio. Her loyalty was to Kendall and Kendall alone. If Abby was nice to Kendall, Jill would shower her with compliments and be all chummy with her. But the moment she was mean to Kendall, you would see the fangs come out, you would see the energy come out, you would see the mama bear come out. She wasn't like Melissa, where Melissa was very doing anything to stay on Abby's good side and literally doing anything to avoid confrontation. Jill wasn't afraid of that. And I think that's what set Jill apart from Melissa, because I feel like, especially early in the show, a lot of people lumped Jill and Melissa together kind of, and even like Christy and other moms did too, because they had similar brown-nosing tactics. However, Jill was more out about it. Like, she was overt. She was like, yo, this is who I am and take it or leave it, you know, whereas Melissa tried to play nice and play slick, but Jill was very open. She was like, yeah, this is who I am. I'm here for Kendall. I'm gonna do whatever I can to get her ahead. It is what it is. So we get into the whole drama of Jill and Kendall going to Candy Apples, and Jill and Kendall have come out so many times over the years saying that this was just a producer-driven thing. Like, this was all for plot. It was not something they wanted to do. Kendall was very upset about it. You know, they had to do it for the plot. But the message that Jill was trying to send in that was that if Abby won't invest in Kendall, someone else will. So that was the narrative. So even though Jill herself didn't really care for it behind the scenes, she played up that narrative on camera because I think that's how she really did feel. Even if she didn't care to be with Kathy. I don't agree with the producers doing that, but I feel like it makes sense for Jill and Kendall's storyline because that was Jill's whole shtick. Like, hey, I want what's best for Kendall no matter what. So another aspect of Jill that I feel like really fits the bill of like the dance mom, stage mom archetype, everything about her, was that she hated seeing Kendall be overlooked. She couldn't stand Kendall being overlooked, especially by someone that she didn't perceive as a threat to Kendall. And this brings us to Nia. So of course, we all know about the infamous Rosa Parks. The infamous Rosa Parks episode where the group dance for the week was a dedication to Rosa Parks, and it was very obvious from the beginning who was going to play Rosa Parks. The only black girl on the team, obviously Nia, right? But Jill was like, wait, but Kendall can do that. You know, Kendall could do that. Kendall's really great. Kendall is this, Kendall is that. And she was trying to brown nose her way into getting Kendall to play Rosa Parks the entire episode. I mean, it was so disgusting. And I talked about this in my breakdown of Nia's memoir. And Nia talked about this in her memoir, saying that Jill to this day still doesn't see an issue with Kendall playing Rosa Parks, which is just so incredibly tone deaf and just really disgusting, and that to this day she still doesn't see the problem with it, but she was pushing and pushing and pushing, and I think everyone was just shocked. I feel like that whole entire episode, everyone was just like, okay, we can't even like get really angry about this. We're just shocked. We're just confused. Like, why are you pushing your white daughter to play Rosa Parks? Like, what kind of person are you? And again, Jill did not see Nia as a threat. Jill literally said that Nia is not a threat to anyone. She always downplayed Nia, always cast Nia aside, and she was always taking little slights at Nia. I mean, she was one of the moms, I think, that was most overt about that or most vocal about that. Anytime Kendall was left out, Jill would get fiercely competitive. Even though Kendall didn't, there was so many dancers that Kendall couldn't hold a candle to. Sorry to say, or not sorry to say, it's just the truth. There were so many dancers that Kendall couldn't hold a candle to, yet Jill was always fighting. Again, she was doing what she had to do as a mom to get her daughter ahead, but I feel like she wasn't realistic about Kendall's capabilities. So another thing that made Jill really memorable is the fact that she would just suck up to Abby so much. So you know how I said in the earlier segment about how Jill would be good to Abby when Abby was good to Kendall, but then when she was awful to Kendall, she would go off. Well, in the very beginning, all she did was try to get on Abby's good side through gifts. So I think one of the most memorable parts of Jill and her persona, and honestly, I think was a gag in the show, there's literally a compilation, a 17-minute compilation of Jill buying Abby gifts. Yes, that's like all Jill would do in the beginning was just get Kendall ahead by buying Abby gifts. She got her massages. She also got her a freaking bench, and dedicated it to Abby. Love Jill and Kendall. She just did so much, and I really feel like this was all producer driven. She would argue these moms down so hard, there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing, and I just want to get my daughter ahead. What is wrong with that? She was just constantly arguing these moms down, and I think she really wore them down. I think she wore them all down because they were just like, dang, you really are willing to go there. So in Jill's mind, Abby was the gatekeeper. And I think what made Jill and Abby's dynamic even more entertaining to watch was the fact that Abby was very hot and cold with Kendall. I feel like there were kids that she was consistently mean to, like Chloe or Nia, but Kendall, she was very hot and cold. She would be really sweet to her sometimes and then really mean to her other times. I don't feel like Abby had the same ire towards Kendall like she had Chloe or Nia. I feel like she saw Kendall as someone she really liked to work with, and she really thought Kendall was a cute kid, but she just couldn't stand when Kendall wouldn't do things properly. It's like she wanted Kendall to be on the beat, on the flow, just like Maddie. And I know that this wasn't brought up in the show, but Kendall and Maddie were very close in age, so I don't know if that was also part of it. It's like someone your age is just outclassing you right now. I'm sure that could have been part of it, in Abby's mind. But I think that was something that I noticed about Abby's treatment of Kendall. So when Abby would be very hot and cold to Kendall, that would just make Jill work harder. Jill wanted to just work harder to get Abby's approval. But the thing is, the strategy didn't always work because Abby always moved the goalpost. It was always the next thing, always a new change. And so Jill was just constantly chasing, whether it made good TV or whether she was desperate. I think it was both. That's what Jill was doing. So another aspect I think about when it comes to Jill and Kendall being on this show is I really started to pay attention to Kendall as I got older. When I was younger, I paid a lot of attention to Jill, but eventually as I got older, I really started to see Kendall, and I started to see how Kendall would react. Kendall, I think, was definitely one of the most anxiety-ridden kids on the show, and I don't even mean that in a bad way. It's just the truth. Kendall was very emotional. She cried a lot. She was clearly very nervous. I don't know if she ever even got a hold of stage fright or got over stage fright. I feel like she always had it, and it showed up in her dancing. And I'm not a dancer. I danced for a bit when I was a kid, but I feel like you could tell, even from someone who's not trained, you could tell that a lot of the tension and worry about messing up, she held it in her body. And I think she really worked to have Abby's approval because she was afraid of Abby, but also her mom, because her mom was pushing her so hard. So it's like, hey, you better get it right because hey, I'm pushing you so hard. I don't know if Jill ever spoke like that to Kendall. I don't know if she put pressure on Kendall like that, but maybe it was just a feeling, right? You could just feel that pressure, of Abby and Jill combined. And I think one of the clearest examples of this was Kendall's music arc. That whole arc with Kendall and Nia in the music video, that was horrible. I talked about it in my video about Nia, so if you want to watch that, definitely go watch. I don't want to break down the entire drama here. But yeah, the whole Kendall Nia music video competition, Abby trying to outdo, Nia's video, Jill wanting to outdo Holly because she didn't respect the manner and method in which she went to do Nia's video. It was just a whole thing. It was just very competitive. And again, Jill didn't have a lot of respect for Nia and Holly to begin with, so it just made it worse. But I think something that gets overlooked in the conversation was how badly did Kendall really want it, I remember the episode where the music video debuted and, they're walking down, they're about to enter Universal City Walk, and Abby's like, hey, smile, shoulders back. Kendall is a ball of nerves, she's nervous, which makes sense, right? You're about to perform in front of thousands of fans on Universal City Walk. That's huge for a 11, 12-year-old girl to do. So of course you're going to be nervous. But you know how some of these kids just owned the entertainment industry or owned the entertainment world and they showed up with a lot of confidence? Kendall didn't show up like that. She always seemed tense. She always seemed really scared and worried. And this is what brings me to Maddie's comment that they made during season 6. I think it was season 6, episode 4, when they were doing the 17 magazine shoot. And Maddie literally said, like, yo, I think Jill wants him more than Kendall. Like, you can tell by her actions, you know, and Jill is working the crowd, talking to everybody at the photo shoot. And she's like, yeah, I think Jill wants him more than Kendall. And I think that was exactly what it was. Jill wanted it more than Kendall.
And she's not as crazy as Jill. I think she wants him more than her daughter. Jill's like, honey.
So the fact that, you know, Maddie and probably the other kids were picking up on this just goes to show how, you know, desperate Jill was. But I think it's important to note that Jill wasn't just deliberately ignoring Kendall's anxiety. I don't know if Jill was paying attention to Kendall's ultimate wants and motivations or desires, but she was a very attentive mom when it came to Kendall's emotions, because Kendall had a lot of outbursts. Kendall would, you know, sometimes be considered bratty to some people on the show. She would yell at people. She would act this way, act that way. And, you know, Jill allowed her to cry. Jill allowed her to feel her feelings. And that's one thing that I can really respect about Jill, is that she allowed her child to feel. Because Kendall was a very emotional person, and Kendall wasn't the type to bottle up her feelings. And she was getting called a crybaby by Abby, and I think she was painted by production as that way. But what I saw was a child that was allowed and had a safe space in her mother to feel. And I think that was very important. I think I really do commend Jill for that. Because all the other moms are always trying to get their kids to shut up or do what they got to do, or, hey, you got to stop this nervousness, like Christy, you know, yelling at Chloe, like, hey, you better stop all this nervousness or I'm taking away your phone. And she apologized for that. She apologized so much to Chloe for that. But I think it just goes to show the difference in how Jill viewed emotions and emotional regulation than the other moms. So again, I think Jill was so obsessed with Kendall succeeding that I think she just overlooked that at the end of the day, Kendall was just a girl that wanted to dance, and the idea of like competitive dancing or being on a stage and all this pressure just wasn't really synonymous with Kendall's personality. I just don't think the two went together. I don't think Kendall was built for that kind of environment. I mean, I'm sure, you know, her being in that environment toughened her up now to be able to deal with a lot of things, but back then she didn't deal with it as well. She showed it a lot more, which again, I respect. So I wanted to touch really quickly on just how much Jill felt threatened whenever someone new came in. This had to do with Brynn in season 6. Like, she was so not here for Brynn, and she was always yelling at Brynn, saying that Brynn didn't have a brain in her head. Brynn ended up saying later on that, you know, Jill kind of was doing it for the cameras, and she could kind of tell that this was for cameras, for drama, for, you know, playing it up. But there were still some things she said and did that I just don't agree with. The way that she would yell at Brynn, the way that in the moment, the way Brynn felt, I just can't, I can't rock with that. The way, you know, telling a kid that she doesn't have a brain in her head, telling her don't talk back to a grown-up. Meanwhile, Kendall was allowed to express herself all the time. And even though I did admire that, I do think there were moments where Kendall was not the most respectful, and she was a kid under a lot of pressure. So you can't like throw the book at her, but you also got to call that out too, you know? So I feel that that was hypocritical, and I don't think that was fair. But yeah, she felt incredibly threatened by Brynn because, you know, she was trying so hard to be Maddie's number 2 girl, you know, because Maddie wasn't around as much. So she was trying very hard to get Kendall to be in that number 2 spot. And then Brynn came along and just swiped it. You know, when Maddie was leaving, she was like, oh yeah, Kendall's going to be number 1. But then I think eventually she conceded and realized that, okay, Maddie and Kalani were definitely Abby's like number 1. And that's another thing that I didn't mention, but Jill was very intentional about Kendall's friendships. You know, she made sure that Kendall was close to Maddie and Kalani because they were the best on the team. And I think it benefited Kendall in a sense because Kendall would dance a lot better when she danced with them. And Kendall even said it herself recently in one of her videos that when she danced with Maddie or Kalani, it forced her to dance up. You know, she had to keep up with them, and it showed. And so I think that's what Kendall needed. I think she just needed like that push, right? Like she just needed like, I think, a push from a peer, not from adults. I think Kendall responded better to her peers pushing her than her parents or her teacher pushing her. And not to make this about myself, but I was the exact same way in school. Like, you know, my parents would push me on different things, and I was like, and it did push me, I did respond, but when I had my friends around me like doing really well, it pushed me to work harder. My friends motivated me. So another aspect of Jill that I really want to touch on is that she was good TV, and she knew it. She had so many one-liners. What money? I don't have her money. Melissa, you're busted. You lied to me. I'm not Becky home Ecky. Like, she had all these one-liners, and she knew she was good TV, and she played up the super sweet and oh my gosh, yes, like personality because she knew it was funny. And again, I think even through all of her flaws and all the things that she did not do right, I think people have a soft spot for Jill because she was self-aware to some degree, maybe not fully. There were many moments of ignorance, like the Rosa Parks thing, like, you know, when they were talking about racism, and at that season 6 or 7 episode, there was clearly so many blind spots she had, but I think she was more self-aware than, like, say, Melissa or other parents, where she was just like, okay, I am who I am. So I think that just really brings home the question, like, was Jill a stage mom? Absolutely. Did it work? I think it worked, because even though Kendall is not like in the entertainment industry, she's not an actress or a singer or any of these things, like at least she's not doing these things actively. I think that, you know, Kendall became one of the most recognized people from Dance Moms. You know, Kendall also meshed really well with the group, and Jill ended up meshing really well with the moms. That's why people to this day always question, was Kendall an OG? Was Kendall an OG? You know, she was not an OG, but she meshed so well with the OGs, and she still came pretty early. So you kind of lump Kendall in, you know, it's like, obviously I watched the show from season 1 and I'm like, okay, this was definitely the original team. This was definitely the OG, the first team. But I think Kendall added something where she didn't stand out, but she helped them blend more. And I think that's something that Kendall doesn't get a lot of credit for, the way she blended really well. And again, Jill was giving a lot of the moms a hard time in the beginning. You know, the moms were not very receptive to Jill in the beginning, but eventually she became really good friends with everyone. And people ended up understanding her. It's kind of like people knew where she was coming from because she was very open about it. So like I said, I think Jill is one of the most fascinating dance moms in the show's history because she very much lived in a gray area. It's like she wasn't the worst, but she wasn't the best. And she was aware of it. And she had her flaws. I think she really lives in this gray area, you know? And like I said, there's moms that are way worse than her. And she was really a comedian for a lot of the show, which I think honestly protects her in some ways. But people still call her out for the way she acted. Again, I still think she was horrible to Brynn, totally nasty towards Nia. I cannot condone that. That's just, I can't condone that at all. Like, I can't condone how nasty she was to those little girls. Like, that was insane to me. And that's why I think she gets a huge stain. But I also can respect the way she really was there for Kendall, you know? So yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts on Jill. Like, she very much lives in a gray area. Let me know what you guys thought about Jill in the comments. Yeah, I hope you guys liked this video. I really love to see y'all's comments and like get into dialogue with y'all. And again, comment any other parents I should cover, like I say in every single video. So yep. Anyways, I will see y'all in the next one.